You want to buy a house, and Yvette here from Grace Group Realty, she's going to help walk us through that process, what you need to do. Let's get you into a house. It's Brad, the mortgage guy here. All right, Yvette, talk to us. I want to buy a house. I'm calling you first, right? You're a realtor. You should know how to do it. What are you telling me?
What I'm telling you, first of all, is our pre-approved.
Oh, wait, you're telling me to call me?
Yes.
Ah, crap. All right, that didn't work. Okay, so the pre-approval process is the first step. Why is the pre-approval process the first step? Don't I need to tell you what kind of house I need and how many bedrooms I want?
No, because the pre-approval process is going to let you know what you can afford.
Okay.
You're going to sit down with a lender. You're going to go over your budget. You're going to go over closing costs.
Yeah.
You're going to go over what the difference is between a pre-approval and a pre-qualification.
All right, so what you're telling me is that we're not talking about we need a pool, we need a 2-car garage, we need 5 bedrooms. We're not talking about that until we know your budget, right? Because you might not be able to afford a 2-car garage. You might only afford a 1-car garage, maybe a carport. Maybe a carport. All right.
If you're lucky.
So, all right, if you're lucky. All right. So pre-approval is first. All right. So we want to talk about the pre-approval process, and you're just throwing this back at me and making me talk. Okay. So the pre-approval process, this should be a pretty simple process, right? I mean, it usually takes somewhere between a couple hours and 24, 48 hours, somewhere around there. Pre-approval is not that difficult of a process, but you do need some paperwork, right? So the pre-approval process is really just quite simply calling up me and saying, hey, Brad, I want to buy a house. What do? I just grab your information. I tell you to send me over some paperwork, some pay stubs, some bank statements, all these things you can get right online. As quickly as you can get that over to me, we're getting you pre-approved and we're talking about that budget, right?
Correct.
All right. And that budget is super important because if you want a pool, but you can't afford a pool, well, then we have to reset our expectations, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. All right. Pop quiz. How much of your income should go towards your mortgage payment? Any idea? Nothing?
Yeah, nothing. Why do we have to budget for that?
Oh, I thought you were looking at me like you didn't have an answer.
I was always taught that 1 week pay should be your mortgage.
All right. So approximately 4 weeks in a month, and maybe there's a little bit more than 4 weeks in a month, but that's about 25%. That's actually, in today's standards, pretty low. You're usually actually up around 30 to 35 is considered standard. So it's actually about a third is pretty standard, but people with better credit could be allowed to go a little bit higher. What I always say, though, when we're talking about pre-approval, that doesn't really matter. What matters is comfort level. If the computer says you can afford here, but you like to go out to eat. I had a guy with a Harley today. He will not sell his Harley. And that Harley is costing him $100,000 in purchase price. And that's one of his non-negotiables. He's keeping the Harley and that's it, right? So comfort level is super, super important. Probably more important than what the computer system says. And I think you're right. I think 25% is probably a good, healthy number.
I just don't think it's realistic for this market right now.
It is tougher. Yeah, it is tougher. So most people are a little bit higher. But again, even if the computer system says you go to 40% of your income or 45% of your income, that doesn't mean you should.
Correct.
Right? And that's a conversation that I always have with people. So you talked about the first step being pre-approved. The pre-approval, I say, consists of this. It is knowing 3 important numbers. Where you should be looking price-wise. That's going to help you determine what you're going to be able to find.
Correct.
What that means in terms of how much money you need out of pocket. By the way, money out of pocket, there's a lot of programs out there for first-time home buyers especially that can get you some extra money so you might not need quite as much as you thought. And then 3, the other super important number is what's your payment, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I came back to you. Their budget is $500,000. And they must be in Longmeadow, and they must have 4 bedrooms, and they must have at least 3,000 square feet. What do you do with that?
They'll probably wait about 5 years before they get a house, their budget.
Okay.
In their desired location.
Okay. All right. So it's going to take a little bit.
Correct.
So in reality,
you have to be flexible as a buyer as well. You might have your must-haves of items that you want in the house.
Okay.
You might have your areas you want, but you can't really be so narrow-minded as to one town, especially in this market right now where we don't have that much inventory.
Okay. All right. So in reality, what you're doing then after that pre-approval comes through is you're having just a really frank conversation and saying, okay, based upon your budget, whether that's self-imposed or not, because you stopped at your comfort level as opposed to your approval level, or you went all the way up to your approval letter, correct, you're now having a conversation of, okay, here's realistically what we're going to be looking at in this marketplace. And maybe they can get everything they want, but sometimes maybe they can't necessarily. Yes. Okay. And you talked about being flexible, and I think that's super important in this market because there's just limited inventory. So if there's limited inventory and if you're looking in one town, if that's your town, you have to be in that town. Okay.
Other flexibilities could be
Yeah.
like, instead of getting that move-in ready house, then maybe you're
Yeah.
going for a house that you have to do a little bit of renovations on it.
Okay. That's a good
Some
point.
people don't want to do any renovations. They just want to move
Yeah.
right into a house, have everything all nice and pretty and shiny and beautiful. Well, at
Yeah.
the same time, once again, you're limiting yourself.
Yeah. I've heard of this guy locally who is a renovation specialist too.
Right.
Financing. Yeah. I can't remember his name. It's like just, it's right here. I can almost feel it. Anyways, I'll figure it out later. But renovation loans, yeah, great option for people. Instead of buying the house of your dreams, make it the house of your dreams, right? Like you want that new kitchen, you want those new bathrooms. There are programs that you can build that stuff in. Getting the offers accepted with renovation loans is a little tougher right
Yes.
now. So you're probably looking for those houses that are maybe, if you're going to build it into the house of your dreams, probably those houses that have been sitting on the market for a little while. And everybody else is overlooking because it's also not the house of their dreams. It's the house of their like grandparents' dreams, and it still looks like
Their grandparents'
yeah,
house.
their grandparents' house, right? Those could be opened up to people who have a little bit of vision, and honestly, realtors who are able to help them see that vision is
Yes.
super important. Okay, so pre-approval, then you're sitting down with them and you're having a conversation about here's my wants, here's my needs, here's my areas, here's my price, all that stuff, and then you're doing what you're putting them on a
I
search.
usually not necessarily. I put them on a search to see what sparks their interest, but then
Yeah.
I actually do go and view houses that I might think that they're not going to like, just to kind of fine tune what their must-haves are. Because a lot of times people like make a wish list, never actually seen it all put together, or they might not put something on that wish list. They're like, oh wow, I really like this idea. So you kind of want to fine tune. So see a couple start off properties just to see
Sure.
what you're going to fine tune their list.
And in this market, I think it's important seeing those properties is probably taking advantage maybe of open houses too,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because there's a lot of houses that are going on the market, open houses. You got a lot of open houses on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Go see all those, communicate with you, talk about what you're going to see, and maybe even go see them together.
To
But
start off, I like to go with my clients, just so
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
having the conversations with them of what they like and what they don't like.
Yeah.
Sending them to an open house by themselves and them calling me. If I haven't seen the house, I'm not really
hard, yeah.
visioning what you're seeing.
yeah, so you'll go to open houses with them
To begin.
as well
Yes.
as
The first couple of times, yes.
as well as show them houses privately. Okay, all right. So we got our wish list. So the next steps are, as you're saying, is going to see some places.
Yes, going to see some places and hopefully put in some offers and get some accepted offers.
Is there anything you'd want to like convey to buyers right now when it comes to offers? What's getting offers accepted? Is there something you want your buyers to know right now when it comes to making an offer that's going to help them secure that home of their dream?
It's a case-by-case basis on the house itself, what the sellers are looking for, what their circumstances are.
Okay.
Whether they want to move out quickly or whether they don't care how long it's going to take. So it definitely is a case-by-case basis, and it definitely also depends on what my buyer is capable of.
Okay.
It's a very competitive market, so a lot of times houses are going over asking price. My buyer needs to be comfortable with that over asking price, so it's not really just one thing I can say to the buyer. It really
Okay.
is case by case.
Case by case. Okay. I'll say from the financing side of things, we're trying to prepare people up front on the financing side by saying we're going to get everything done up front. There's a difference between a pre-qualification, a pre-approval, and a full approval, right? An underwriting approval. So what some places are doing, like you got some places who literally somebody just goes online, fills out some information, and they say, hey, based upon the information you provided us, here's your pre-qualification. That's the weakest of the bunch, right? So the next step is the pre-approval process, which is you've given us all your documents. We've actually put eyes on those documents, reviewed those documents, and we're saying to you, hey, you're now pre-approved to go shopping. That's the absolute minimum. Like, this is garbage. I can tell you when somebody fills out their information online, maybe 20% of the time it's accurate, right? And it's not because they don't know what they make or they don't know how much money they have. It's that they don't know how mortgage qualification works, and they don't know that the fact that, their per diem and its variable income affects, they maybe have worked the last month and been making $120,000 a year based upon a annualized basis, but last year they only $30,000 that year. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, they don't know. So pre-qualification is useless. A pre-approval is your minimum standard. The step further that we're taking people is full-on loan commitment, which is like as good as like cash. It's basically saying, hey, this is cash. We have the money in the bank. Here's our loan commitment. We have the money. You don't have to worry about it. So that's something we're at least doing to help people be competitive. And for me, on the lending side, that's what I'm preparing people for. And I'm saying, you need to do this at minimum because you have to shine. You have to look, right? Like in this market, you have to shine.
Absolutely. I mean, most realtors won't accept an offer and won't even show the seller an offer without at minimum pre-approval.
Okay. All right. So
Because what's the point of showing your seller an offer if you don't know for sure, you haven't vetted that buyer that they are able to buy?
sure, absolutely, that makes sense. What about some do's and don'ts? Yeah, any horror stories of people doing some stuff that maybe sabotage their own deals? You got anything for us?
I'm sure you've definitely heard some of these horror stories.
Yeah.
Sometimes suddenly they'll, after getting pre-approval, they go on some unexpected vacation where they just spent $50,000 on a vacation where
Yeah.
it just came out of your savings account that your pre-approval was counting on that savings account money.
Yeah. Yeah.
People sometimes will pay off their car loan.
Yeah.
Well, you just took
Cash.
pay off a loan when
Yeah.
that was already factored into your pre-approval. Plenty of, I'm sure you have more horror stories than I do.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, I've had people, they get a clear to close, they're not closing for 2 weeks, and they thought, oh, I'm clear to close, nobody's going to be watching anymore, so they quit their job. Like, I've had that happen.
Happened to that one.
I did. The agent that happened to, he's watching, and he's right now going, oh, we got to talk about that again. But yeah, absolutely, I've had that happen. I always tell people, don't do anything out of the norm. Like, if you go out to eat once a week, go out to eat once a week. You have to put gas in your car. You don't have to worry about putting gas on your credit card, but that's because that's what you always do. Just normal activity is fine, but don't do anything extra. So like, I tell people don't go and put your furniture for the new house on a credit card before you close, right? Like I've had people do that. And now all of a sudden there's an inquiry and we're like, hey, there's an inquiry. What happened? Oh, I went and I got furniture. Oh, okay. How much is it? Oh, it's $20,000 worth of furniture. That's $400 a month. You don't qualify for a house. Congratulations. You have really nice furniture. You just don't have a house to put it in.
And that's, you say, here's a storage unit.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You can afford that. But like that's terrible. But that's stuff we have to tell people because they don't know. They just think, well, I'm buying a house. I need furniture. I'm going to go do it. So that's something that we have to prepare them for. I had another one that I told the guy up front that story because that had just happened like a few weeks before. The person literally had to return their furniture and then, that's how they ended up buying their house. But a guy, he calls me up. He goes, hey, Brad, this is like 5 days before closing. Hey, Brad, Brad, that's that guy's name that does the renovation loans. I just remembered. Anyway, so I had this guy, he calls me up. He goes, Brad, I just bought some furniture. I go, we talked about this, right? He goes, yeah. He goes, I was just pulling your leg. He goes, I didn't put it on a credit card. He goes, I just paid cash for it. I go, what cash? He goes, well, I had like $14,000 and I just paid the cash. I go, you needed that $14,000 to close. What do you mean you just paid $14,000? He's like, oh, I forgot. I'm like, what? You forgot? So yeah, I just say like, don't do anything out of the ordinary. The car is the traditional. Everybody's dealt with that. Somebody bought a new car and it's got a big payment and, just communicate with your lender. Like
Even
that's it.
changing jobs, I would think, would cause.
Yes.
Even though you might end on a Friday but start on a Monday.
Absolutely.
I
Yep.
didn't even think about the whole job thing. I've never had anybody.
Yeah, this person just quit and they weren't working ever again. I don't know. They ended up not buying the house. It was just a bizarre situation. But anyway, all right. So anything out of the ordinary, I'd say just don't do. Like stick to your normal everyday routine that you do and charge what you do. And if there's something that's coming up, you got to communicate that with your lender.
Yes.
So I have a buyer right now. They're buying in New Hampshire and they called me up and said, hey, I need a new car. And I said, well, what do you mean you need a new car? I said, can you just do it after closing? We're closing in 2 weeks. She said, well, no, it's a lease. It's up next week. And I was like, oh, okay, no problem. So we just communicated and said, okay, here's your max payment for the new lease. Don't worry about it. Go get yourself a new car. You have to have a car. You know what I mean? So communicate with your lender is important in that case. There's sometimes life situations come up and just happen that their lease came up in the middle of a transaction and they had to do it. So, I mean.
Question I do have for you regarding budgeting.
Yes.
So just like you were talking about the closing costs of like gentleman need $14,000.
Yeah.
In this market, what would you say percentage-wise, the purchase of the home, how much of it would be closing costs?
Well, I would say some of it depends on the purchase price. Let's answer that for a first-time home buyer because that's probably the one that has the most constraint because people who are moving up, they have a house, they're selling, they've got more money to deal with, and it's not as vital of a question for that person because they have more of it. So the first-time home buyer, let's say, is buying a $350,000 house in this area, maybe $400,000 house. That $400,000 house is probably going to have about 3 to 3.5% in closing costs, including their attorneys, their recording fees, taxes, insurances. All of that is probably somewhere around that 3 to 3.5% range. Now, if you go higher in price, the attorney doesn't cost more. So the percentage goes down as you go higher in price, but taxes are more expensive. So that increases the price too. But percentage wise, it probably goes down a little bit as you go up and goes up a little bit as you go down in price. So start at that 4 at like 3 to 3.5. And as you go up in price, it maybe gets less percentage. Down in price, it's more percentage. Does that make sense?
No, it really makes sense.
All right. What I can say is it's real important to have a conversation, especially in that group where that money is usually typically the most sensitive, meaning they don't have as much of it. It's really important to talk to a lender that provides the programs for first-time homebuyers. So there's some lenders that don't do mass housing, for instance. A select few lenders happen to do mass housing. I happen to do a lot of it. I'm on their list for one of their top people in Western Mass because I do a lot of them. But there's some that don't do it. And I sometimes get calls from people and I say, hey, you might qualify for mass housing. Let's look at that once you apply. And they go, oh, no, don't even bother. The last person told me I don't qualify for that. And I go, well, why'd they tell you that? Well, they didn't tell me exactly. Or, oh, they said my income was too high. Or, I just, for whatever reason. And I talk through and I go, it sounds like you qualify. And then I go, well, who'd you talk to? And they tell me and I find out it's a lender that doesn't do the program, right? As opposed to saying, hey, sorry, we don't offer that program. They just say, oh, no, you don't qualify. And that's terrible. You definitely want to talk to somebody to find out what your options are, not necessarily just what the options are that person has to offer. That's one of the reasons why I work where I work, because I feel like we offer the most amount of products that are out there. And I don't want to be in a position where I'm like, I don't have that. I want to have it, So as first-time home buyers is super important. Talk to about that mass housing, talk about, the down payment, the Chenoas, the Rhode Island housing, the Connecticut housing. Most states have these programs that can get you a little bit of money to ease the burden of those costs ultimately. So maybe you can take that 3.5% and get it completely covered,
That'd be nice.
So, all right, what else?
So we talked about the process of getting ready to buy a home. Now, how would you tell a client to stay ready?
Okay, so we talked about doing what you normally do, right? If you charge that gas on the credit card, you don't have to not charge gas on a credit card. Like, you do it. But right through the day of closing, you are being monitored by your lender. That sounded very big brotherish, but you are being monitored. And the credit agencies are actually giving alerts to the lender and saying, hey, credit got pulled. Hey, a new account just opened up. So you pull up to closing in that brand new car, guess what? Your lender finds out about it the morning of. They have to inquire about it. So it's important to have that diligence all the way up through closing. Now, after you close on the house, nobody's following you around. I can't stop you from going to buy a new car. I can't stop you from, charging up your credit cards. I would advise and hope that you remain financially responsible throughout. But after closing, nobody's watching after that. But up through the day of closing, we're going to be checking employment. We're going to be getting credit inquiries notifications from the credit bureaus. All of the above, your assets could be looked at again through that time of closing. So all of the above, I would say you have to be diligent and not make any big financial moves. That's it. All right. So we are ready to buy. We are staying ready to buy. You're going to find a house. If you want to buy a house, Yvette here is going to help you with that. She's from Grace Group Realty. If you're looking to get pre-approved, hit me up. Let's talk. Let's talk about how we're going to get you ready. And honestly, even if somebody's not ready today, we're here.
They might be ready tomorrow.
Yeah, they might be ready tomorrow. But even then, hey, we're here to help you put a path together so you're ready next year, even if that's the case. So we're in for the long haul. If you're looking to buy a house, we're going to make it happen. Give us a call.